We recently did a video about chainsaws for dummies, and just like the video we did about tying down my little excavator, the comments pointed out some things, A, that I overlooked, and B, that I got wrong. And so if you're new to the world of chainsaw, or you think you're going to be in the world of chainsaws pretty soon, check out that video, and then this is the addendum that you're probably going to wish you had watched. The first thing that was a mistake. This is a few of the chains that my dad and I used when we were logging years ago. And I thought, and maybe I still think, that these are semi-chisel bit chains. That is, that the bit is a semi-chisel bit configuration. But there was a comment from somebody that sounded like he knew what he was talking about that said, that's not a semi-chisel bit, that's a full chisel bit on this old still. So let's look at that for a second. I don't even know what the difference would be between a semi-chisel bit and a chisel bit. I know that a chisel bit chain is usually filed with a flatter, like 6 or 8 sided file, and it's tricky. But when you get one, if you want to file it round, you just file it with your round file until it conforms. And so I'm going to plead ignorance and thank you for the education. Maybe this is a full chisel bit. Maybe it's a semi-chisel bit, I don't know. But boy, when it's sharp, it cuts. The next item is to contrast the difference between a chisel bit and a round. We talked about that last time, but I don't think I pointed out an example. So this is a little still. What is this thing? It's a MS-171. Not a bad little saw. And this is a round chain configuration. And by that, what I mean is the outside of it does not come straight up. It immediately begins to roll over so that it's a circumference right from the factory, right? You're sharpening in part of a circumference across an angle. That is a round file chain. It doesn't have that sharp corner leading out in the front that a chisel bit or semi-chisel bit has, and so doggone it, you need to keep it sharp. And I mean, you can keep it sharp. All you got to do is file it, but just owning the difference between a round chain and a chisel bit filed chain. Next thing, and I'm going to get just a little bit defensive here, boys. Several of you busted my chops for pulling the file back. If you're listening, the file is just riding back. I'm not trying to file it on the back stroke. Is that a subtle distinction? Well, here's something that's not a subtle distinction. Chainsaw files don't last because you sharpen a lot and they're small. The way to keep your file sharp is not by not pulling it back, it's by not cutting into the dirt. Don't rock your chain, because when you rock your chain, man, you've got some work to do. Now the other thing is, and let me illustrate it like this. The way a file works is by being drastically harder than the steel you're filing. It's only the top bar or plate of these things that is truly hard. Some sort of chrome steel up there, the rest of it is fairly soft, down into the drivers that are just plain steel, as far as I know. So it's just right at the top that the file's working. So if you let it ride when you pull it back, the file doesn't know that it's riding on regular steel. And besides that, does anybody worry about pulling their knife back in contact with a piece of wood? No. When you're chiseling, if you're chiseling out a mortise, you drive your chisel in, you pull your knife across the work, and you don't lose sleep about pulling it back, because the knife is harder than the wood and the chisel is harder than the chain. So pulling it back is a wives' tale about wrecking a file. If it's a good file, it just doesn't care. There were 6 or 7 comments about a new sharpening jig. I think that Still or Echo or somebody brings it to the market. And it might be terrific. In fact, let's just say as many of you as raised your hands and says, yes, it's a game changer. I'm sure it's terrific, but I don't have one and I didn't get one, but I will get one. It kind of doesn't matter to me much. Although, you know, that's a narrow-minded thing, isn't it? To say something that I've never tried doesn't matter to me. Stupid on the face of it. And so one of these days I'll get one, I'll try it, and I'll report back. But in the meantime, I think you can take it from the comment section that there's some kind of a sharpening jig out there that is not, as all the rest of them seem to be, a waste of time and money. All right, so this is not going to be long, but the first 7 items that I'm going to address starting right now that came in the comments are excellent safety suggestions that I glossed or overlooked or just spaced out. And I'm just going to go down the list here. And the first is you got to take breaks when you get tired. Cutters, professional cutters around here work a 6-hour shift, 6 hours, because you get exhausted cutting timber. Any more than 6 hours, people start getting, well, killed. So you got to take breaks, you got to pace yourself, you got to do a realistic analysis all the time. Gosh, am I strong enough and sharp enough to keep doing this? Because any lapse when you're running a chainsaw is a bad deal. The first of the things that you start to cut corners on that will kill you is your footing. You got to have your footing good. You don't cut, well, sometimes you got to cut out of position, but you just make sure that you've got good footing and, especially when you're tipping trees, you make your escape route clean. You take 4 or 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it takes to clear your way out. You cut the brush, you throw the branches out of the way so that if you have to run, you're not going to trip at the last possible and worst possible second. The next thing is, it is a state of mind that the last cut is just as important as the first. When you walk in there in the morning and you start your saw and the smell of the two-stroke and it's just, you're ready to go. That first cut, yep, it matters. But the one that always gets you is the last cut, when you're tired and you're not quite paying attention. And so the last cut is as important as the first. I think that's an important concept. So you got to pay attention. I mentioned that I had been making a mistake of sometimes letting my hand just close over the bar, my left hand, instead of wrapping my thumb. Yes, true. But in general, I don't think I paid close enough, I didn't emphasize strongly enough that you try to keep your left hand in a place where it can activate the chain brake if the saw comes back. When you turn the saw over to put your face cut in, obviously you can't. And there are times when you got to flip that thing around. But in general, there's a reason that the chain brake is on the top, and it implies and dictates the fact that you should keep your left hand where it can make contact with the chain brake, even though it's often inertia that triggers the chain brake in the event of a kickback rather than contact with your hand. Which brings us to one more point about kickback. If you have a choice, you keep the saw a little offset to the right so that if a kickback happens, it's just not right in line with your nose. Because, you don't want to get dead center with the kickback. And if it is coming back, if you've made a mistake, if something went haywire and the bar's coming back, it's nice to have it, whistle by your ear without drawing any blood. Okay, brush is grabby. A guy, I forget how the comment went, but the fact is that when your chain's running, especially if it's loose and it's beginning to bag down a little bit, it's easy for a piece of brush to get up inside of there and get sucked back into the clutch and either knock the chain off or just kind of jerk the chain around. Brush is grabby, leaves are grabby, small limbs are grabby, so you should never expect that somebody's not going to try to jerk this thing out of your hands. Now brush, mouse traps. Let me see if a shaky old man can set this thing on a camera because it illustrates perfectly. Boy, that is a hair trigger. Very appropriate. When you fall a tree, when you dump a tree, big or little, especially little ones, littler, you dump second growth fir into a patch of vine maple or madrone or anything else, the tree's coming down, and as it comes down, all of the branches and the brush and little trees are taking a strain. And when you walk in there bucking those limbs off, everything's under tension. And the moment you take your eyes off the ball, bam, the mousetrap bites you. Except when the mousetrap is that big around and it's coming up under your chin, or it's coming sideways along the side of your head, or it's under the bar of the saw and the saw is coming back, you're loading mousetraps everywhere you go. And you have to not get so fixated on bumping the knots and bucking the log and getting the lengths right and picking out your next lay for your next tree. Don't get so fixated on that you forget that you're surrounded by tension and good, hard wood fiber, which will raise a knot or break a bone. Okay, some maintenance things. Good comment. You've either got to drain the gas out in the winter or stabilize it or make sure you use ethanol-free or all of the above. Nothing kills saws faster than old gas going sour inside a gas tank and carburetor and eating up the seals. It's a problem now with ethanol. You got to maintain the bar. Every third or fourth or fifth time, or pick your number you file, you ought to roll the bar over, because the bar is taking most of its wear where you're pushing down, right there, right? And so that groove, which I think is either 51 thousandths or 61 thousandths, I think, can wallow out. You can get a burr along the edges that you can file off with your flat file. You can take it to a saw shop and they can roll the bar back down and then ream it out to get the clearance right. The bar needs to be maintained along with everything else, especially if it's a roller tip. The easiest and fastest way to tell if your saw is sharp is not to get your thumb out and check it, but just have a look at the sawdust. You'll see cutters sometimes when they're bucking a log, they reach their hand under and get a handful of chips, and they look at it while they're still cutting. Now you got to be a pro to do that, because without a hand on that top bar, but you can do that. But you check your chips. If it's dust, you got to file. If it's nice long chips, kind of heavy, if that chain is sharp, it is pulling, it's hungry to pull the wood out, and the wood is hungry to jump off in front of that razor sharp edge, and so you're getting chips. So keep an eye on that and laugh at your friends if they're trying to cut with a dull chain like I did in that previous video with that little cordless Makita. It was so dull. Yeah, I covered most of it. I've had a few saws that have gotten so far out of adjustment that at an idle, the chain keeps jerking along, or maybe that's a mistake. You got to acquaint yourself well enough with the high and low idle screw that you can turn that idle back down so that when your hand's off the trigger, when the saw is just sitting there, it's not running. There's nothing worse than falling off a log that's 8 or 10 feet in the air and landed on your saw when you didn't turn the idle down and the blades and the bits are still turning. So anyhow, I don't know how much of this is interesting. A lot of this is just blah, blah, blah. But you know what? If you think about it, you pay attention, and you keep these things in the back of your mind, odds are you're going to have a great day. You're going to have lots of great days. You're not going to get all bloody, and you'll be able to get up and go back to work the next morning. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.